I just finished playing chapter 4 and wow, this was the best chapter yet. A few things were a miss in my opinion, but overall way better than all the other chapters. But the reason I believe it's so good is the ending. My mind has been turned to absolute mush after I saw that, so let's break it down piece by piece and sprinkle it with a theory. Oh, and by the way, if you didn't already know, massive spoilers ahead, so please click off if you don't want to have the ending revealed. So for the ending, Doughy turns on us after Safe Haven is destroyed by the prototype, and Doughy's conflict with who he can trust after being turned into a monster makes him try to kill us, even killing his own mom in one of the tapes, and it shows that he has patience to a point. And with the death of his friends, we reached that point. And after a pretty difficult boss fight, we turn him into some goop, which I thought was at the end, but I should have known it's never that easy, which is when he grabs us just before we go through the door with double scanners. But because of the most conveniently placed liquid nitrogen and probably multi-million-dollar drill, we were successfully able to kill Doughy and make our way deeper into the factory. After this, we watch a tape and slide down into shelf ventilation block B6, where we meet Poppy and Kissy. And when Poppy starts going off on us for not doing what we were supposed to, I knew that the entire time Harley must have had a point. He knew what Poppy would do to us if the opportunity arose. But after that, she's still trying to get a hold of Ollie, most likely to figure out what in the world to do next and for some guidance, which is when the biggest plot twist in the world happens, because Ollie answers the phone and we figure out that Ollie hasn't been Ollie for a long time. And when Poppy also figures out that it's been the prototype the whole time, she tries to hold her ground and say that the prototype is soon gonna be finished with all the toys that we've put to death. But the prototype does not care in the slightest and threatens to put Poppy back in a cage. And then the prototype tells us that it took the explosives we planted earlier and put them to good use, but you'll see what it's talking about in a second. Then the prototype says this, and this is huge for a theory that I'll explain after we get through the basics.
I admit, though, I'm disappointed.
After all that time in your case, I'd hoped you'd see things differently.
Don't you understand?
It's always been about you
And we'll harm you. What we are. That's not a truth that can be burnt away. No, not when it can mean so much more.
Prototype. Please.
It's time to come home.
Poppy.
It's time to come home.
Now, please keep in mind, this is huge for the story of literally all of Poppy Playtime, because combining this with a very hard to find VHS tape, we can see who Poppy and the prototype really are. After this, Poppy leaves us behind for dead. She runs away as she's the only one who can fit through the hole. Who would have thought that Kissy Missy is the most loyal character in Poppy Playtime? Then, the prototype blows a hole through the ground, and while Kissy was trying to save us from falling, her injuries were too great and her arm literally tears off. Then we make it through a cave system where we see what seems to me the poppy flowers. These are mentioned so incredibly briefly in a chapter 2 note that I wouldn't be surprised if you missed it, because when you go into Elliot Ludwig's office, we find a note about a failed experiment to revive a rat. However, the death of that rat was planned, and using a poppy flower, Ludwig tried to revive it. And with the experiment including a poppy flower, Ludwig tried to revive it. However, it sadly failed, and Ludwig said maybe it'd work on something bigger. And let me say this too, this piece of evidence is also huge for the theory that I came up with. But once inside the next room, we find the last VHS tape where Lath pulls a fast one on us and basically says we're guaranteed gonna die, which is when the camera pans to the door and we see what seems to be Kissy Missy. She must have fell down right after us and followed the same path that we did. Well, that's until Kissy gets closer and we actually see Huggy still alive. And he is not happy. He already tried to kill us in chapter 1, and now that we've tried to kill him, he's going to be 10 times as mad. And that, my friends, is where chapter 4 ends. And honestly, this exceeded my expectations. But Now let's actually get a little bit deeper into the important parts that add to Playtime's story, which is my huge theory that I'm dying to tell someone, because the only other friend I have who plays this game is probably still beating it and won't answer his text messages. And so, to start this theory, you'll need my last piece of evidence, the Untitled tape. Probably the hardest tape to find in the game, and I legit found the location because of a YouTuber named Foxplay, because you gotta get the tape while running from Doughy and before the rocks crumble on it. But after the Doughy chase, when you play the tape, we get some very interesting dialogue from Poppy.
It was awful. I thought we were gonna leave. Leave the factory. All those people. Prototype says we can't leave. I hate him. I hate him. And I hate this place. And I hate that he's... Right. I wish you were here, Dad. I could really use one of your talks right about now. When you were running this place, you always knew what to say.
So, in this tape, Poppy says that the prototype was right and that she misses her dad when he used to run the place. This is making my head spin, but think about it. We've never heard another toy call Harley or someone else's dad, but somehow Poppy has a dad who used to run the place. Think about it. Who used to run Playtime Co? Elliot Ludwig. But that's not the mic drop. Not even close. I now need to connect this to my other pieces of evidence. The first being the way the prototype spoke to Poppy, then the little note from chapter 2, and the documentary that was in chapter 2. The documentary that we saw in chapter 2 mentions that Elliot lost a very close relative, and considering they didn't say how they were related, like it was a daughter or his wife or his father or someone, in my opinion they did that on purpose because they didn't want to say daughter, which would draw attention to Poppy all the way back in chapter 2, where we were still thinking we were gonna escape the factory. But now, the note from chapter 2 that was most likely written by Elliot, considering the fact that it's right on his desk, says that he was working on reviving things with a poppy flower, which makes me almost certain that Elliot was trying to revive his lost loved one, who we now can see is Poppy. And last of all, but most certainly not the least, because this is the mic drop moment, think about it. The prototype was the one who put Poppy in the case and says it was so Poppy could see things differently and understand, kind of like a parent would ground a child. The prototype says it's always been about you and me, Poppy, what we are. Poppy never calls the prototype, but just says prototype, and the prototype tells Poppy to come home. The prototype might actually be Elliot Ludwig. Now, this sounds far-fetched, but let me get some concerns out of the way, because in the tape, Poppy does say that she hates the prototype but loves her dad, but that can be easily explained if there was a change of personality after becoming the prototype. And considering you're the prototype, there's bound to be errors, one of which could be a changing of personality. And it's super easy to account for him being transferred to another body, because in another tape we hear that they transferred Sawyer's consciousness too.
This is wrong.
Some disorientation is to be expected.
Who gave you the order?
I gave the order, Sawyer.
Nobody else can do what I do. You need my knowledge, my intellect.
Why do you think you're sitting in there right now and not in Boxy's stomach? From now on, you're here to give the lab boys answers when they need them, and carry out procedures when and how we tell you to. So fight, or give in, because either way, we own the infrastructure you're wired into.
And when we kill him, it seems he's in this big thing right here, and because my theory is that this thing we saw crawling around was the prototype, why couldn't they just as easily transfer Elliot into the prototype's body with the thing that they used to transfer Harley? And considering the huge parallels between Five Nights at Freddy's and Poppy Playtime, it wouldn't be a surprise if Elliot tried to revive his daughter just like William Afton, and it wouldn't be a surprise for him to try to be immortal just like William Afton. And so, this concludes chapter 4 for me, at least for the overview, because I've got so many videos planned out, but I wanted to do this one first so that I don't spoil the chapter for everyone.